Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Strategic Business Influencer, my new series for leaders who know that in today's evolving world, trust is the greatest competitive advantage. Today's guest is special. This is Vidya Moorthy, who is the Global Affairs Strategist and President of Austin Businesswoman, a thriving community of over 1,500 women across Austin, Texas. Known for making sense of global power shifts and translating them into clear, actionable insights for today's business leaders, Vidya has become one of the Austin's most trusted voices at the intersection of global affairs and local impact. Her signature keynote, The Lion in the Changing Jungle, brings that expertise to chambers, corporate events, and conferences. Born in India and now calling Austin home, her career spans international PR and crisis communications, cross-cultural strategy, and executive leadership across the U.S. and Asia Pacific. Shaped by a master's in public relations from Michigan State and an MBA in finance from Osmania University, today she channels all of it into one mission. The women who understand what's happening globally are the ones who lead locally. Vidya, welcome to the Strategic Business Influencer, and thank you for being here today.
Happy to be here, Paige, and that was quite an introduction. Thank you for that as well.
Absolutely. Well, I want to dive right in. You moved to Austin in 2021, knowing very few people, which is crazy for me to think about knowing you today, because I believe you're one of the most well-connected women in Austin or people in Austin. And so I want to know intentionally, how did you set out to build that community from scratch? How did you do that?
Thanks for that question, Paige. When I moved here in 2021, it was 2021 June, and I think when I moved here, I probably knew my realtor, but not personal. He wasn't a personal friend. My husband and I, we just were introduced to him by a common friend, and literally nobody else. So I would say that when I came here, I knew I wanted to have and start and run my own business here, but I didn't want to start a business in a community where I didn't know anybody, where I didn't know what the psychosocial fabric of Austin was. And I can tell you now, it's a whole lot different from Detroit, where I've lived, worked, and played before. But and that was a very isolating feeling. So literally, Paige, what I did was I reached out to women. I reached out to networking groups, and I asked if I could attend their events. And the one thing that I'm sure you'll agree with is that Austin as one larger community, I think is more giving than any other. And
Yes.
they're really open and they embrace you in ways that are so unexpected. And everybody is so generous with introductions. And so that really made it way easier for me. And I identified, half a dozen different organizations that I wanted to be on the board of. And that gave me a lot of insight into the different cities in the greater Austin area, the different communities, the corporate side, the entrepreneurial side, the education side. And but above all, I would say it's having these ridiculous number of coffees with these women who are exceptional. They're exceptional professionals and they're exceptional humans. And I think I scheduled maybe about 12 coffees a week, and I did that for, I would say, a year and a half straight.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's really, I think, how I met more people. People introduced me to other people. I served on boards, and I felt like I was contributing to society. And I think that is really, I had two objectives. One is how do I, of course, build my own network, find my own tribe? How do I do that? Two, how do I understand how Austin thinks? And so that helped me there. But the greatest, and I think one of the most positive but unintended outcomes of all of these meetings and events and organizations was that it gave me a sense of belonging. I was nearly 50 when I moved to Austin, years ago. And it's harder to make friends as you grow old, but not anymore.
Well, I just love your approach because it is so intentional. And I think that just speaks volumes about what happens after those coffees for you especially. What did what did the coffees, what did the outreach, what did that teach you about relationships and creating opportunities here in Austin?
What it taught me about relationships, Paige, is that a relationship needs many touch points,
Mhm.
just like, we like the ones we have with our own girlfriends, with our favorite cousins. It needs touch points, it needs time, it needs energy, it needs genuineness of intention.
Mhm.
And they blossom and grow over a period of time, right? Yes, you meet a
Absolutely.
person at an event, you set up a Zoom call or a coffee, and they tell you who they are and what their passions are and what challenges they're having. But in order to escalate that relationship to the next level, I think it has to be followed up with some real conversations, not about work, but about who you are as a person and what your fears are and what your challenges are and what you're proud about. And I think it's connecting at a very granular humane level that
Mhm.
allows relationships to kind of almost snowball organically into up until a time where you realize that, hey, now she's a 2:30 a.m. friend.
Right, absolutely. And I think you've done so much in contributing to friendships, relationships to so many in this community, but you've also contributed your talent to help entrepreneurs grow and flourish. So I want to talk a little bit about your expertise here. Many business owners reach a point where growth feels just harder than it should, or maybe they're stuck. From your perspective, what are some of the biggest opportunities entrepreneurs overlook when trying to grow their businesses?
Well, one of the recommendations that I know it's very easy to make is to encourage people to read your book, because I love the spokes that you spoke about. Because what happens is it gives the reader a framework to absorb the content and makes it easy to remember. And memory really facilitates implementation and usage, which
Mm.
I suspect is your ultimate goal as the author. You want people to use that information, not just read it, right?
Mm.
So I think when it comes to difficult inflection points, one I think is the understanding that it's not happening only to you, it's happening to every business person out there. Uh,
Yes.
the challenges might be different, the industries are different, and therefore the dynamics in every business are different. But every business owner, I think Google and Meta onwards, downwards to the nail salon down the street, I think they have a specific inflection point where I think you do have to strategically pivot sometimes or think about paradigm shifts within your business. One of the greatest things I think is because as women, we always connect with the intention of sisterhood. And I think there's a fundamental difference when guys interact.
Yes.
They're absorbing and soaking in what the other guys are doing at work, what businesses they run, what contracts they're after, what their potential client pipeline looks like, what their
Mhm.
track record has been. I don't think we, as women, when we interact, um, we have not, I think we've not brought ourselves to a point where we have the information we need to leverage the networks we already have.
Mm.
And so it's so many times, Paige, I cannot tell you this, that there would be women who've known each other for years and yet not known who all that other person knows, or who her clients are, or what
Yes.
contacts she has at a client maybe you're trying to chase. So I think leveraging resources that are already in your network that you're not even aware of is is probably one of the most significant, I think, opportunities that exist for women out there. The other thing that I will say is, and maybe this is because many of my friends are as old as me or older. I know your children are still young, but a lot of us have children that have graduated college that are
Mhm.
enormously talented, right?
Yes.
And anybody who works with the younger generation knows that their skill set is different and necessary, and
Mhm.
maybe a little bit of recalibration from our side in order to be able to work with them. But uh, a lot of respect for the talented among them, right? So when it comes to looking for people that can help you with certain projects, that can help you implement initiatives in your business that perhaps you yourself don't have the skill set for, just look around. There's a 21-year-old there who'll do it for you in a week or even less. And I have benefited from that. I know
Mhm.
that. And I just wish that smaller businesses would consider hiring interns or, people for temporary projects like this, who completely change the game for you. I mean, they
Yes.
know about apps and tools and portals and AI agents that can transform your business, and you might not. So that would be my second tip to them.
I love that. That's so true. And it allows you too to invest in, the next generation of talent as well and share with them, knowledge about your network and knowledge of the workplace. What I feel like is so unique about you is your work really sits at that intersection of business growth, communication, as well as global perspective. So, how does understanding what's happening in the broader world really help leaders make better decisions inside their own businesses?
You know, um, because I have two girls, maybe I watched this movie with them when they were really young. I think it's called Pocahontas. And there's a song in the movie called The Color of the Wind. And it talks about how all of us are connected. And
Mhm.
of course, the song hints at this miraculously divine spiritual way that in nature, all of us are connected. But that connection actually extends to politics, economics, and our daily life. And I think over the past, more than 3 decades that I worked, Paige, I've been fortunate enough to have clients in Japan, clients in Switzerland, clients in Poland, in Asia, mostly all of Asia. And certainly, I've learned adulting in the US.
Mhm.
So I have a deep sense of gratitude for America because everything my husband and I are is because of the US. And so, in my attempt, I think, to give back to society, I kind of looked within and said, what is it that I can contribute to society here that might help them understand a little bit more about what's really going on in their businesses or what's really going on in their lives?
Mhm.
And you might imagine that things that are happening on another continent or in another part of the world um, have nothing to do with our businesses here in Texas. These dots are not difficult to connect, Paige. They're in fact in a
Mhm.
straight line when it comes to things like inflation, when it comes to things like interest rates, and at what rate can a small business find a bridge loan, or the availability of labor, or where your supply chain extends into. And what global trade routes, mean to you. For example, you might be an owner of, let's say, half a dozen hair salons, but your hair products, they come from Vietnam or they come from China.
Mhm.
And you don't really pause and think and break it down as an entrepreneur on what that does to your costing model, what that does to your product range when any one of these little elements is disturbed. And I I think that when you ask me how they are connected, the one line answer is how are they not connected in a way?
Mm.
Because the supply of money in the economy is dependent on all of these things happening at the macro level. And
Right.
more than anything else, Paige, I think off late, our emotional standing has also been connected to what's going on because, it's overwhelming for everybody, regardless
Yes.
of where you are on the political spectrum, regardless.
Right. Absolutely. And we've even seen that from of a service business level, just people's emotional
Mhm.
standing being so important to what our clients are facing in various industries. So
Mhm.
I love that you mentioned that. And Pocahontas, I haven't thought about that song in decades. So I love that you bring that up. What a beautiful illustration. One thing I want to make sure we touch on is something that I'm so impressed by. But you led, and many might not know this, you led crisis communications at the VP level during the BP Deepwater Horizon spill. This was one of the most scrutinized corporate crises among modern history. And so, what did managing communication at that scale teach you that you now bring to the leaders that you work with?
Yeah. So when the spill happened, I think BP had a global initiative to handle crisis communication, and they ran comprehensive drills on every global site. And just south of Detroit, there is the city of Toledo where BP has a plant, and there was a massive global effort there to train us all, on a scale. I think on a disaster of that scale, there are so many people who are involved. So they wanted to simulate it and make sure that we were prepared for it. And one of the things that you realize, I think, when you eventually navigate uh, that kind of a situation, is it really comes back to basics.
Mhm.
Nothing's more important than human life. Um, Absolutely nothing. And people need to hear that over and over again. Um, and I think that you train yourselves on, and you're a communications expert. You've been in this industry for several decades, so you know yourself. But what you say is probably as important as how you say it
Mhm.
and where you say it. So it's
Right.
not just, the wordsmithing that is important, but the selection of the medium and the delivery of the message itself. So I think when you are trained formally for years to always sync those three elements up, um, it increases your chances that your message will be received uh, with the same intention that you meant to deliver it. And I think that is actually a huge, huge skill for a business person to have.
Absolutely. Because you're not only communicating to potential clients and customers, but it might be investors. It might be, attracting talent. So I love thinking of those three things. Through your leadership of Austin businesswomen, you have had a front row seat to hundreds of successful women entrepreneurs and executives. What patterns do you see among the leaders who continue to grow, evolve, and expand their influence?
The first I would say is they're masters of their craft. Whatever line of business theirs is, whether it is a tech product, whether it is, the beauty and health industry or whatever, they
Mhm.
know their market, they know their product, they know what the consumer wants. They have an exponentially higher level of market intelligence, which I would say is at the very top. The second thing is those women don't shy away from discussions about money. They're very comfortable about percentages, margins, and asking for more. And I wish that more women would come into that position of really self-given power to talk about money because it's your business and it's okay to ask for more. The third thing that I will say is they have all invested over a long period of time to build relationships. And the way that they build relationships is to remind those in their circle that those relationships are not purely business driven.
Mhm.
and that their circle of influence, if not circle of control, is allowed to grow much faster and much stronger than they had intended it to. I think, so domain competency. The second one would be certainly the ability to understand money and cash flow, and talk about money. And the third would be relationships. I remember reading a long time ago that the guy who turned around IBM back in 1994, when IBM's market cap was tanking, was actually he had come there from Home Depot. And even today, when you look at these massive Fortune 500 companies, you'll often find that the CEOs and the way that they move are between industries. They go from energy to banking to, consumer goods. And what that teaches me is that at the very top, you only need to know how to handle people and money.
Mm.
And so
Yes.
I just threw in, core competency to that list.
Absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, as you were talking about earlier, it all comes down to the attention and building relationships and your ability to do that and grow that. And I love how you mentioned that it can go beyond business, and that's good. That's what draws people to you. That is what builds trust, oftentimes. I know you do a lot of work advising entrepreneurs, doing strategic sessions with entrepreneurs. If you are advising an entrepreneur who wants to reach their next level of growth, whether that's revenue, impact, influence, where would you tell them to focus first?
Well, I hope that every entrepreneur, man or woman, is for at least some part of their day focusing on themselves. And I think when you take care of yourself from within, inside out, then you are able to function at capacity. But outside of that, I would say that invest in making sure that whatever your product is, whether it is a physical product or a service related product, make sure that it is agile enough to change according to the changing market. Because in the 2 years that I've had ABW as president, I can't tell you how fast things are changing around us, right? And so I think being nimble is very critical at this juncture in our common history. The other thing that I would say is, again, don't ever get your eyes off of relationships. Relationships define your goodwill. They define your image. They define your standing. And that's really what people base their perceptions on. And in business, sometimes perception is reality. It's not how great I think Vidya is inside my head that matters. What really matters is if, women like you think I'm worth a few cents, right? And so that's where I think women should focus their efforts on.
Absolutely. And in getting to that, there are two questions that I like to ask every guest that comes on this show, and it's speaking a little bit to what you just said. I want you to answer who are you in addition to being an entrepreneur and a CEO?
Oh gosh, I'm a goofy mom. I'm a goofy mom of 2 girls. I sing a ton of Indian classical music, and that's really what I do. I cook up a storm virtually 5 times a week in my kitchen. Wow. And we're all vegetarians in the family, so I spend a ton of time cooking. And we loll around at home with our lab, and we are, do things that I think every family does. We loll around in the pool, we debate politics, we cook together, and I spend a significant amount of time trying to talk to my kids' friends. My older daughter is 23, my younger daughter is running 19. So I feel like that just, it's so exciting to me to see what these kids are talking about. And they're so full of energy and possibility. And I think talking to them reminds me that that we too perhaps must be like that always. So
Yes.
so yeah, that's what I do when I'm not doing work.
I love that. And how fortunate for your children to have a mom who's so curious and involved in those conversations. Now, the second question I have for you is what is the impact that you want to have at the end of every single day?
At the end of every single day, at the end of every single day, um, I certainly hope that I've worked towards building a legacy that I'd like to leave behind for my two daughters. Uh, Not necessarily monetary, right?
Mhm.
But more importantly, and most importantly, I want them to see that there is, when you put your heart to it, that the old eight statements still hold true. It's worth it to dream. Everybody has the right to dream. It's possible to accomplish your dream if you work at it. You can achieve your dream without being a crook. You know, just the basics that our grandparents told us. Um, and the way that I think I try to accomplish that also, Paige, is um, I try genuinely to have one quality conversation a day with one other
Mhm.
human. You know,
Mhm.
whether it's 10 minutes on the phone, it could
Mhm.
be a friend, it could be somebody I know through work, but, you know, just being connecting on a very raw human level, like what's really going on? Paige, how does it feel to have two kids instead of one? Is it exponentially harder? You know, and how are you doing all of this with everything that you do at WPO and running Zolker? You know, you're a superwoman yourself. So I feel like if you and I spend a few minutes talking in a day, that's what I would
Mhm.
want to learn from you.
Mhm.
And that would be my goal for every single day.
That is powerful. Thank you so much for sharing. And Vidya, where can people go to learn more about you and how to work with you?
Thank you. So, if you want to learn more about Austin Businesswoman, it's austinbusinesswoman.com. Woman is singular. And out of that, if you want to talk to me and reach out to me, it's Vidya Moorthy. You'll find me on LinkedIn. It's really not that hard. I check my LinkedIn messages very regularly. And so that would be the best place for folks to reach me, or you can just write to me at vidya@vidyamoorthy.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was so meaningful and I know everything that you shared is just going to be so impactful for all of our entrepreneurs listening. So thank you for taking the time.
And thank you for doing all of this, Paige, to just amplify voices that would help others. And it's such a pleasure to be in conversation with you. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for tuning in and we will see you again soon.